Of all Asian American experience related to racism, one that I cannot pass without mentioning is that incarceration of Japanese American during World War II, when more than 110,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans were forced to relocate and were placed in heavily guarded internment camps. While this fact is well known, I'd like to emphasize the significance of Civil Liberties Act of 1988 that resulted from this Japanese American experience in light of the history of civil liberty in the United States. This act, signed by President Ronald Reagan, cited racial prejudice, wartime hysteria, and a lack of political leadership as causes for the incarceration. Reagan granted a red list of 20,000 US dollars and a formal presidential apology to every surviving victim. What is notable is that this resolution didn't occur overnight. First, there was a rise of civil rights movement and a growing activism in the Japanese American community in the 1960s, which led to the formation of Japanese American Citizens League, calling for a resolution seeking individual reparation in 1970. This movement and the leadership by Senator Daniel Inouye and then other Japanese American congressmen eventually led to form the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, CWRIC, a body appointed by Congress in 1980 to make findings on and suggest remedies for the incarcerations. It took another 8 years of work by the Commission, including hearing in 20 cities with testimonies from more than 750 witnesses, before the Civil Liberties Act was finally signed into law on August 10th, 1988, 43 years after the end of World War II. This is a major victory in American civil rights history because it was a sincere attempt on the part of the US government to redress the injustice acted upon Japanese Americans based solely on their race. By acknowledging its past mistakes and paying out substantial compensation, the government demonstrated its willingness to uphold the fundamental constitutional rights of all US citizens in the future. It is it is extremely important that we continue to learn from the lessons of our past unjust and discriminatory actions based on race, the danger of government stereotyping and profiling, and how fear may lead to intolerance. For most of us, holding stereotypes is often not intentional, but therefore, racial education is absolutely critical because it will not only help us remove stereotypes, misconceptions, and social barriers, but also make us feel more compassionate and accepting of one another, which can open up new possibilities for forming better relationships. Now, we are more informed and more aware. Can we celebrate racial diversity? Well, not quite. Becoming more informed and more aware is an essential step toward it, but that is only one side of a coin when we discuss the work we need to do. What's the other side? Well, let's talk about the diversity for a moment. Corporations talk about it, governments and churches talk about it. They say they want to achieve diversity in their organization. But if a company hires an employee of color in the same proportion those groups are represented in the population, can they celebrate the racial diversity in the company? No, because it does not tell us if those minority employees are compensated equitably as compared to their white counterparts, or how they are treated by white supervisors in their workplace. What we really need to achieve in the workplace, community, and a society at large is racial equity. Equity is defined as justice, fair treatment, and advancement opportunities for all people across all systems, such as workplace, housing, education, healthcare, and so on. Equity is, in short, fairness and justice. This is what we need to achieve, and that's the other side of the coin. We need to become more involved in an effort to achieve racial equity because diversity is vague and does not safeguard fairness. Well, yes, I know that achieving equity is a monumental task that requires tangible changes in the system, such as law, corporate practices, and politics. But we can take baby steps. In fact, the corporate world is moving quickly, adopting DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as a part of their business practices and operational strategies because they are realizing that is not only is an essential strategy for their survival, but actually give them a competitive advantage. And most recently, an anti-Asian hate crime bill passed in both the Senate and Congress. This is a phenomenal bipartisan accomplishment. That's great news. And then I'd like to see more changes and improvements coming in the near future. But I want us to take one further step forward. James F. Keenan, a moral theologian and bioethicist, said, quote, "Justice is not dependent upon the law. That is, a society does not outlaw an activity does not mean that activity is just. The more we act for the common good by being inclusive and letting others speak for themselves, the more we can learn about the people who we ought to become." Unquote. What has been proven to be an effective tool to use to make a deep change in a society is empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of one another. Empathy helps us see issues from new perspectives. Empathy is a skill set that each person can train to develop. No matter how much we are informed or no matter how much knowledge we acquire, without empathy, it's all dry and abstract. It's that deep understanding and that sense of feeling that actually change minds and drive us to act. We want to become an empathetic listener to the stories that display how history, racism, and the power structure of this country impact individual lives. I like to encourage those who have been marginalized to tell their stories. And only when we listen to their voices with empathy, we can turn what could have been an argumentative conversation into a positive, constructive one. And then it can reinforce our relationship with one another. And that's the kind of people we want to become and the society that we want to build. So, going back to my identity issue and the reason why I didn't want to be labeled by names like foreigner, Asian woman, or immigrant, now become a parent. That's because of negative perceptions associated with those names. It's a shame that those perceptions impacted how I felt about my identity as an Asian or Asian woman. No one likes to be labeled by others. All I wish is to be who I am. I want people to see me and know who I am by my words, my actions, and my experiences, and my strengths and weaknesses, and my heart, not just by how I look. And this right to self identity belongs to everyone. But I'm realizing at the same time that in the words that I speak as an Asian woman and the experiences and stories that I share as an immigrant, I have something more unique and powerful than I ever could if I wasn't, and it's something invincible from which I derive my pride and self worth. Who are we becoming? I hope we are becoming more informed, more aware, and more involved with empathy in an effort to build a society that is more just and with equity for all. It's been said many times, but there isn't really a way around it. We cannot stop becoming until no one is labeled, harassed, attacked, and treated unfairly based on their differences and uniqueness. We cannot stop becoming until our differences don't make any difference in how we are treated, and that each one of us can live with sense of dignity and pride. Thank you.